Hi, welcome back. So in this video, we'll talk about this fourth part, understanding the prompts. Yeah, and this is a very important topic because how effective our prompt is, the effective LLM response would be. Yeah, and this is one of the significant or sought after skill in the modern world from an AI engineer. Yeah, so we need to understand what is a prompt, what is an effective prompt, and what could be the mindset or the components that you should use, or how do you build a mindset for an effective prompting. Yeah, so this particular video covers that particular aspect. Yeah, we'll start with what is actually an effective prompt, then we'll talk about key components of an effective prompt, then we'll see some examples of effective prompts. We'll also see some templates that can be useful, and these are again just for examples. I mean, these are not like okay one shot templates or something, but some examples so that our mindset grows around that. Yeah, and then we'll also see some examples of using those templates essentially around for code generation and for recipe generation type of thing. Yeah, so this is what we're going to discuss in this particular video. Yeah, now what is a prompt? So prompt is essentially your ask or your query to LLM. So whatever you type in for example, or browser interface for OpenAI like ChatGPT, right? Whatever you ask, that is a prompt. So what you ask to an LLM and what do you expect in return from an LLM is generally called as a prompt. Yeah. Now the prompt could be as simple as tell me about yourself. Yeah. Or it could be as vague as tell me something about history, or it could be crystal clear explaining what is that particular thing that you are expecting from LLM. Yeah, so that's what we're going to discuss here. So uh, the limitations and the capabilities that we talked about in the previous video, right? Especially those limitations, all of that you can overcome with an effective prompt. Yeah. Now, then what is an effective prompt? If I look at the notes, right, an effective LLM prompt is clear, well structured instruction and or a question given to large language model to get a useful, accurate and relevant response. Yeah. So it talks about a prompt should be very clear and it should be well structured instruction or maybe a question that you're going to ask to LLM, and in response what you would really expect, you even talk about that in the prompt. Yeah, that way LLM has a very good clarity about okay what is your question, what are you expecting, and what data you're actually giving for analysis, and how do you expect the outcome. Yeah, everything is made very clear. So that's an effective prompt, and we will see the examples and what components it should have for the effectiveness, clarity, etc. But then this is what the definition of an effective prompt. Yeah, an effective prompt, and why is it important? Because an effective prompt guides the LLM. Oops. Okay, so it guides the LLM to produce desired output because you're so specific, you're so clear, you're so contextual around your ask. LLM can happily respond back with the level of clarity that you're expected are expecting in your in LLM's response. Yeah, it's like an example is given. It's like your friend is asking, your friend is coming to your home and asking the address, right? Assuming that you don't have Google Maps, etc., and you're directing your friend. Yeah, now how vague your directions or how precise your directions decide how much your friends struggle to reach your home. So in the same way, how good your prompt is, how effective your prompt is going to decide how or what is the quality of an LLM response. Yeah? That's why this becomes very important topic. Yeah? Now coming to the key components of an effective prompt. Yeah. Let me slightly adjust this. Okay. The key components of an effective prompt. One is, the first one is obviously the clarity. Yeah. Um, so it talks about what it means is use simple, straightforward language. Okay. Just to avoid any sort of confusion, etc. Use very simple and straightforward language in your prompt. Yeah. And clearly state what you really want. Okay. And based on this, LLM will rely on, because LLM is all about patterns, right? Patterns of text. Yeah. How clear is your instruction? Based on that, an LLM can respond. Okay. An example is given. A bad prompt looks like, tell me about stuff in space. Why is it bad? Because it's very vague. What stuff you're talking about? Yeah, and it's very unclear. The response from LLM could be anything, yeah, about this. It may talk about stars, it may talk about planets, and anything. Okay. Whereas a good prompt could be, explain the main difference between planets and stars in our solar system. Yeah, so you're very clear about your ask. You're very specific that you want the differences between planets and stars, and that you are specific about your solar system. Yeah, then an LLM response as compared to the previous prompt, tell me about stuff in space, and about this current prompt, you can see the difference. Yeah, that's where exactly the clarity part of a prompt becomes very important. Yeah, next one is specificity. Yeah, you need to be very precise about your ask. Yeah, what actual query is, in what format you are expecting LLM to return the information, what is the topic, and what is the scope of the topic. Yeah, you need to be very specific about this. Yeah, and why it is very important, because again, LLM can go very generic if you are not talking about the scope of the topic. It can start anywhere, it can end anywhere. Yeah, but then if you are very specific, you say, okay, this is exactly what I want, and LLM can precisely go back, do its work, and then come back without overriding your request. Yeah, an example for it. Okay, here it says a bad prompt says write something about history, whereas a good prompt says write 100-word summary of the key events in American Revolution. Okay, it talks about what is the response expected, 100-word summary about what, the key events in American Revolution, rather than simply saying write something about history. Which history? As Indian history, American history, what is the topic that it is supposed to cover, how much should be the response? Nothing is specified there. Whereas here it can still be better, but at least a more precise specific topic have been asked. Yeah, now the next one is about the context, and this is very important, because if you provide a proper context, LLM response would be around it. An example I'll tell you. Whenever we're working with a co-pilot, right, a code generating agent, if I ask the co-pilot to analyze my code and find out any issue with the code, right, I need to specifically provide a context. For example, maybe a Java file or maybe a Python file, right? If I attach it, it can take that as a context, go through that particular code and come back with the responses. Whereas if we are not doing that, if we're not providing a proper context, what happens is it will go through the entire workspace, maybe our entire folder. Maybe there are hundreds of different programs, and this is where the LLM might struggle, and it might revert or review something which you are not actually intended to review. Yeah? That's why the context becomes very important. Let me try to put it as a sticky note. Yeah. Okay. An example is in case of context, right? Write a story. It's a bad prompt. A good prompt could be write a short story about a young girl in a futuristic city who discovers a hidden forest, written in a hopeful tone. Yeah. So this is the kind of context. So you're actually talking about, okay, the story is about a young girl, and this is about a futuristic city, and the young girl has discovered a hidden forest, and these kind of things. Yeah, or else in my earlier example of code review, right, the actual code file or the Python file or a Java file that I attach become a context for the copilot. Yeah, next one is about the task definition. Yeah, by using a proper task definition, we can make the prompts better. For example, clearly state the action you want the LLM to perform. For example, explain, summarize, generate, list, compare. And why it matters? Because LLMs work best when they know exactly what they want to execute. An example is like, bad prompt is AI stuff. Good prompt is list 3 benefits and 3 risks of using AI in healthcare. Yeah, so the definition is very clear. You're talking about healthcare using AI, and you're asking about benefits, and you're asking about risks, and three benefits and three risks. Yeah, so this is how a good prompt might look like. Yeah, now you also talk about constraints and parameters. Sometimes you need to you want to limit the response that AI is generating or LLM is generating. For example, limits like word count, tone, audience, a format to shape the response. Yeah, and this is very important thing. You can always ask um, explain something in quantum theory, for example. Yeah, but then you can say explain this to a 5-year-old kid or explain this to 80-year-old parent. Yeah, something like this. Then automatically the response would be such that the LLM will ensure your direction about explaining it to 5-year-old kid is where it is trying to simplify a lot of things. Yeah, so that is much more important. For example, you can say a bad prompt could say talk about climate change. A good prompt would be explain climate change in 50 words or less using simple language suitable for 10-year-old. Yeah, so this is how you're putting 50 words limit, and making sure that the response is not huge. And this is one of the important factor when we talk about the cost. Yeah, tokens are something which we'll talk about how much money you're going to spend in LLM's response. Yeah. So these kind of things, and then providing appropriate examples in your prompt could drastically change the LLM response. For example, a bad prompt could be like write a poem. Yeah. Then a good prompt could be like write a 4-line poem about ocean, rhyming like the sky is blue, the grass is green, the clouds are new, the hills are serene. Yeah. So you're giving an example, and using this particular example, it can actually generate, our LLM can actually generate another 4-line poem about the ocean. Yeah. So these are actually the examples. Yeah. Then very important thing is about the tone or style. You can always ask LLM to, or you can always specify the tone. For example, formal, casual, like we can simply use a style like professional, storytelling. Okay. An example is like describe a dog is very bad prompt. But then a good prompt would be describe a dog in a humorous tone, as if writing for a comedy blog. Or I can say, here is the text. I mean, we can always include text in a prompt, and we can say, summarize this professionally for an executive or for a chairman of a company, and explain briefly the actions to be taken for the below notes from a meeting. So this way, you can clearly specifying, okay, you want a professional summary, and then you are also talking about, okay, this summary is for the top executive of the organization, and then you are giving the context. So that way you are actually ensuring the response would be appropriate for a top management summary. Yeah, so this is how basically your prompts need to be. In the next examples, we'll actually see certain templates. Yeah, so which will talk about all these things. So in essence, it's very simple. Your prompts need to have clarity, very specific. Yeah, and then they have to provide sufficient context, and you need to be very clear about what you're asking, the task definition, and whatever the constraints, parameters, limits, and all that stuff. The tone can be given, examples can be given. All those things will make sure the response from LLM is going to be as you expected. Okay, so this is one thing, and even after doing all these things, right, sometimes the LLM response might be not as you expected. Then we will get into more of a conversational style where we can keep fine tuning until you actually get a better response or the actual desired response. Yeah, but by following certain templates or by following these things, right, maybe your first few attempts would be like you get the actual response what you expect. Yeah, some tips about crafting an effective prompt. Be direct. Start with a verb like explain, write, list, etc. Rather than um, you're talking about, okay, hey, I wanted to do this, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. Yeah. But there's also another way where people use a role player type of thing. Like they say, assume you are 2 decade experienced IT professional, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. So you define a role and then you ask your query. Yeah. Avoid overloading. Don't ask too many things in one prompt. That's again a bad example. Asking it to do this, that, one thing, second thing, third thing, fourth thing. Instead, you get onto more of a conversational style where you ask, I mean, you give the whole context, examples, then ask first question, then ask the second question, then ask the third question. So that way you can actually make it more meaningful. Yeah. Keep testing, refining your prompt until you actually get, this is more of a practice, honestly speaking. Yeah. Always use delimiters or delimiters, otherwise the response could be too huge and it becomes meaningless, and it eats your money in generating the tokens. Yeah. And wherever possible, and very important thing is, not all models are same. Yeah. There are models which are very good at, let's say, code generation, while there are models which are very good at, say, image generation. There's no meaning in actually asking a very complicated code to be developed by something which is actually meant for image generation model, right? So you need to be aware of model's strength, and for that all the documentation etc are available. And again, different models comes with different parameter. Like same model might come with 3 billion parameter, 80 billion parameter, 170 billion parameter. Yeah. More parameter size, more training data, and more maturity in the model. But then there are events, or there are cases where you may not need that 170 billion parameter model, while a 3 billion parameter is more than sufficient, right? But using an appropriate prompt template, you might get better response from a 3 billion parameter model. Yeah. So that's why prompt engineering is very important. So in the next video, we'll actually see certain templates that we can use, certain examples, and we'll also do some hands-on.